Hello, Clipper Nation. Welcome back to the View from the Clipper podcast. It's your boy, James Warner, joined as always by Josh Sexton. Josh, how have you been doing?
Good man, it's been a long time since we last spoke, hasn't it? We've also been doing a little bit of catching up before we clicked record on the Zoom here, but it's been a long time. Last time we spoke, the Clippers were in the playoffs. The Clippers are no longer in the playoffs because the playoffs are over. The what are they calling it? The worst trade in NBA history means that the OKC Thunder and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander are the NBA champions, NBA Finals MVP, regular season MVP for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, of course, formerly of the LA Clippers. So. Me and you have not just been away mourning that. We've not just been sat in a dark room crying. We've been getting on with pretty busy lives over the summer. I've mostly been basking in the glory of Liverpool winning the Premier League. I know similar for you with Spurs winning the Europa League too, which was a great pleasure to watch. Being
Yeah,
someone who was very anti-Manchester United. So yeah, but enough about the football. I'm ready to talk basketball again, ready to talk about the Clippers again. It's been an interesting few days, especially in the wider NBA landscape, but loads for us to talk about with the Clippers as well. How about you, James? How you feeling?
yeah, good. Just excited to talk basketball after, yeah, I mean, you've covered it well there. Obviously, yeah, things didn't end particularly well for the Clippers last year with obviously a disappointing Game 7 loss to the Nuggets. I don't think they can feel too hard done by. Obviously, Nuggets ended up taking OKC to seven, who, like you've rightly pointed out, ended up winning the NBA championship. I think you can sort of think of it on the flip side as well. The Clippers drafted an NBA champion. It was just unfortunate he was not on the Clippers to pick up the chip. But obviously we can touch on the draft in a bit. But obviously, given the Clippers' poor draft record over this sort of new era of LAC, to be able to draft an NBA champion is a win in some aspect, I guess. But yeah, no, you're absolutely right. We've both been really busy, obviously, with the other sort of football related victories. But now we're back. Looking forward to digging into what is looking to be quite a big off season for the Clippers. There's lots of different talking points to jump into. I think we best start with the NBA draft. Now the Clippers had a first round pick in this draft. Uh, After the Paul George trade, the Clippers obviously haven't had much control over their draft future, and they don't really have a proper pick again until 2030. The Clippers selected 30th in the draft and selected Penn State center Yanic Konan Niederhauser. So Yanic's 6'11", 243 pound. He's Swiss. He's very athletic, one of the best vertical leaps amongst centers at the NBA Combine this year. He averaged 12.9 points, 6.3 rebounds, 2.3 blocks, shooting 61.1% in college. Josh, what were your thoughts when the Clippers selected Yanic? Do you think he'll be a good fit, and what kind of what kind of future do you think he can have with the Clippers moving forward?
It's tricky, isn't it? Because I know it's been one that's been met with a lot of, I guess, division among Clippers fans in the last few days, really, and not necessarily in like Clippers fans are, arguing with each other over it kind of way, more just that some people have expressed a bit of like a lackadaisical, I guess, attitude towards it and the draft in general. And being completely honest, and I'll explain why I probably sit on that side of the fence. And we've got our Clippers UK group chat on Twitter as well, don't we? And like, there's a lot of debate in there, which sort of goes either way. I know a couple of the guys who contribute to that, and I've definitely seen a couple of, you know, uh, prominent Clippers commentators on social media expressing, a bit of anger towards the way the Clippers have drafted, and Yannick being the latest one. The reason I probably sit close to the sort of lackadaisical attitude is like I saw a tweet from, I think it was the account Zubac season, which is always an interesting one when it pops up on the For You page. I can't say sorry that I follow Zubac season. I love Ivica Zubac. I think Ivica Zubac had a good season, but that Twitter account is not necessarily one that I end up agreeing with the opinions of a lot. So, and he pointed out like the draft history of a couple of other teams, and the guys that they'd hit on, and I pointed out because it got put in the Clippers UK group chat that the reason a lot of those teams are able to draft well, and especially a lot of the people who were mentioned in that, was a bit of a false equivalence because a lot of those teams were rebuilding teams before they were able to draft guys who, were drafted in the lottery within the first round. So I don't necessarily like begrudge the Clippers too much in terms of what they've been able to select with. Um, the Yanic Niederhauser one feels like it came a bit out of nowhere, and that is maybe where I'm a little bit more inclined to be like, okay, well, what are the Clippers cooking up here? And I'm always like, I'll always wait with bated breath to see. Like, I'm happy to be proved wrong. So if the Clippers, prove me wrong and Yannick ends up being a key part of the rotation, whether that's this season, I would be very surprised, or in the future, I would be, pretty surprised. Um, then I can look back on it and be like the Clippers, pulled this one off. No one expected them to. Nikola Jokic is the best player in basketball, in my opinion, and he got drafted during a Taco Bell commercial, famously. So you never really know, I don't think, who's going to be a hit and who's not from the draft. Like it can go any which way. I don't think the Clippers have drafted particularly intelligently. I have a bit of sympathy in the sense that the Clippers have just been a winning team for basically as long as I've supported them. Um, so like we're not a team who's ever had to rebuild. We're barely a team who's had to like retool in any sort of large scale way. Besides maybe in the past couple of years, particularly since Paul George walked. So little bit of sympathy for the franchise. Part of me that thinks they could draft more intelligently. I know you, James, are much more into the analytics, so you can probably tell me more about someone like Yannick and even obviously Kobe Sanders, who I'm sure we'll come on to talk about in the second round as well. The Clippers drafted another Kobe. Um, but like, because you've said like, and you said it in the Clippers group chat that the analytics are so important to drafting. It's maybe where I think the Clippers are lacking in some regard. But then, like, I've also seen this same GM, this same front office makeup in general, this same head coach, if you want to even throw a tie into it, manage their way out of some serious holes, manage against expectations a lot of the time, and also pull off some unbelievable finesses on the trade market. So if they have a little bit of like a weakness in a draft sense. I can kind of understand it for the pluses of all those other things, which I think when you're owned by the eighth richest man in the world, you probably don't have to worry too much about drafting for the future, as nice as it would be if the Clippers would start to, hit on a few more of these hidden gems and uncut gems, because at the moment, what we keep seeing is the Clippers getting low picks, because obviously most of them are pick swaps with the Thunder, and the Thunder have been one of the best teams in the NBA for the past couple of seasons. But then equally doing nothing really of any meaning with those picks. So I'm keen to hear your thoughts, because I know you are probably on the other side of the coin from me here, and I'm definitely prepared to like hear that opinion out too. Because as I say, like the drafting is almost up to personal preference in the end, and my personal preferences are like if the Clippers keep being a winning basketball team, I'm kind of all right with them just finding their future through the trade market and through free agency.
Yeah, I think the draft is a difficult one from a fan's perspective, even like an analyst perspective. I follow a lot of draft analysts on Twitter who spend a lot of time watching film, looking at the analytics, and I think it can only give you so much of a picture. I definitely have the opinion that a lot of draft picks now should be analytical driven. I think it can tell you a lot about a player, but it doesn't always give you the full context. And ultimately, like you've mentioned, I think late first round picks, even second rounders, is extremely. It's I can't even say hit or miss. It is mostly misses. I think the reason you often get people sharing, oh, these were the successful second rounders, is because they were second rounders. You don't ever really remember like the successful first rounders, because typically the best players are picked in the first round. At least in the top 15, you're going to be looking at some NBA contributing minutes in the top 15. But I think as you go through, and especially I think you're seeing now in the NBA draft is it's very different to how it used to be, in terms of you don't always get the draft class that is sort of ready to be in the NBA. I think a lot of people in this draft class actually went back to college. Now there's sort of more financial incentives to stay in college longer. And then secondly, I've also been aware of reporting that it's very agent driven in terms of like the late first round, even the second round, in terms of players are now almost controlling their destiny, which is why you're seeing a lot of second rounders being traded around. So I do think it makes having late first round picks, second round picks even harder than it already was. Like it was already a real challenge to find like the diamond in the rough, especially when, and I've obviously mentioned the importance of analytics. The analytics is available to everyone. Everyone has the same information, but obviously you'll bring the different guys in to work out. So, I think the Clippers have drafted better over the last couple seasons, but I think obviously going back from that, they've obviously had a lot of misses. I've not been too disappointed with, I think, the last two drafts. I think they've managed to grab some decent players that I think we can still potentially see a future with. I don't think it's too late to write off, Kobe or Jordan Miller or even Trenton Flowers. I think has been looking really, really good his time in the G League. I think the biggest issue with the Clippers, and I think you've touched on it, is just the opportunity for these young players to develop and to actually showcase themselves, because I think the majority of them are too good for the G League, but then they're not good enough for the NBA minutes because the Clippers have put themselves in a position where they have to win now. Like the Paul George trade and even the Harden trade to extent has obviously extended that window of needing to win, which means, if you've just got a player who's in the G League, you're not going to be trusting them to minutes. And I think a lot of shade has been thrown Ty Lue's way for that, but I don't think that's really on him. It's his job to pick the team he thinks can win every single night. We've not had the opportunity over these last few years to even reset the team, or even, we've had injuries, but it's not been like Boston Celtics level where they've, sort of half blown up their team and now could potentially even be a lottery team next season. We've not even had that. So, we've not been given a chance. We've been given a breath since the 2-1-3 era started to be able to really bed these guys in. And I think Lawrence Frank spoke to that in his draft interview, where he mentioned that he wants to get the young guys closer to the practice sessions that the starters have and sort of the first team have, get them as close to them as possible so they can really develop beyond the G League. So I think there's a way to go there. I think in terms of Yanic and why I sort of brought up that, it's there's a lot of people on Twitter who are either fans or analysts. We don't get to see them in person. We don't get to meet them. And I know there was some jokes going around saying, I think they'd quoted Lawrence Frank's interview where he said that he could speak multiple languages. I think obviously that is something that can be clipped up and made fun of, but ultimately we haven't met any of these people. We're just looking at their stats on paper and watching a few of their highlights. That does not tell you the full picture at all. So I'm not going to sit here and write off Yanic at all. I think at the time, you look through the draft class, you look at who potentially the Clippers could take. You see some stats that you quickly make your mind up on who would be good. I did not for one second consider Yanic for the Clippers. I don't think many people did, so I wasn't particularly a fan. I think there was some analytics shared after the pick around his box plus minus. He's had particularly negative box plus minus over his few seasons. I think his high school seasons and his first college season. And typically those who don't really have a positive box plus minus get drafted. I think there was like a list that was shared. I can't think of it off the top of my head, but it wasn't good company to be with. And I think that often, you can use analytics to sort of carve out like a typical trajectory of some of these players or where they're going to go to. So I think he's very raw. I can't really share any analytics from him that stand out. He's a blocking threat. He can score the basketball, but I still think that he's a very raw talent that we've seen in other guys who've come to the Clippers. I think he's only been playing the center role since he was 17. So not for a particularly long time. And I think ultimately the Clippers aren't really looking for players who can come in and play right now. And I guess that's part of the overall strategy with the Clippers right now. They're on this sort of final window where ultimately Kawhi Leonard and James Harden are likely going to expire as the Clippers and they're going to start again. So there's not really much point in bringing in sort of players who can contribute right away. And maybe it is sort of a better strategy to go for guys who are maybe not there yet in their development, but have got sort of the profile or the sort of starting to develop skills that they could eventually take to the next level. I just think that the issue with the Clippers is always going to be that they are going to be in and around the late first and picking in the second round. And like I said, you're really searching for those gems. They're not easy to come by. And I think the Clippers have been particularly unlucky in different situations. They've just not got the minutes to go around. I do hope there's a few young guys next year that can go and get some more minutes. But I think in Yanic's case, I would be shocked if he played a single minute next year. Obviously, he's got Ivica Zubac. I think he can learn a lot from him. We can touch on the other big man that he can learn from, which I think can be good for his development. Ultimately, it's not. I don't really have too much takeaways from Yanic other than I think his comparisons from what I've seen is his ceiling could be like maybe a Daniel Gafford in terms of his rim finishing, his shot blocking presence, being a rim protector, and that's extremely valuable. And I think one of the sentiments that also came out of it was why are the Clippers going for a big man when obviously they've signed who they've signed, which we'll touch on, and obviously they've got Ivica Zubac. Why are they grabbing the big man? I think just look at the free agency market right now. The Lakers don't even have a big man. They would kill for someone who could protect the rim and be sort of screen and roll threat. I think big players are going to be valuable going forward. So if you can get one early on and sort of develop him and use any sort of opportunity to improve his game, then maybe in 3 years' time when we are looking at a new era for the Clippers, we've got a young big man who can come in and be a backup. So that's the way I see this pick. But to be honest, there's not too many more takeaways for me really. There were some other guys I was looking at, including I think Noah Pender, Ryan Cook-Brenner, Johnny Broom, who I think could have been good fits for the Clippers. I think maybe Cook-Brenner was more of the favoured pick amongst a lot of fans and analysts on Twitter. But no, I mean I'm not going to write the guy off, and I really wish him the best of luck. And I think, yeah, at least I'm hoping now that they're making some changes in the way they develop the players, we may see him maybe next season and in a couple of seasons' time. But yeah, don't expect much from Yanic in his first season as a Clipper. Kobe Sanders was, I guess another sort of late second round pick, 6'7", San Diego native. And I think that was another fact that a lot of Clipper fans clung to and like saying, oh, only getting him because he's from San Diego, much like, we're only getting Yanic because he can speak multiple languages. But, I think his stats jump off the page in terms of his ability to protect the basketball, his efficiency with the basketball. He's got a 4.5 to 1.8 assist to turnover ratio, put up 15.8 points, 1.1 steals per game. But yeah, is likely heading towards another two-way contract, and I guess even less likely to see any of him next season. Another one for Summer League and more G League development. Obviously, he'll go to the back of that queue in terms of minutes. So there's some guys in front of him, like I mentioned, Trenton Flowers is someone who's likely probably next in line to get any kind of minutes. So yeah, another one for the long term. But again, I wasn't too familiar with Kobe or his game, so keen to see how he gets on Summer League. I guess you have any thoughts on Kobe at all, or even Yanic on sort of anything that I've just mentioned there, Josh?
Yeah, I guess just sort of like almost closing thoughts on both of them because you've covered both really well, and like they're not two picks that I knew about too strongly before like coming into the draft, but I wouldn't expect to know about the 30th and what was it, like 48th pick in the draft. Really, it's like not it's just not necessarily in my wheelhouse. Like I would describe myself as much more of like vibes basketball watcher than an analytics basketball watcher. Like I can do some of the analytics talk, but not necessarily when it comes to the draft. Like I'm not. I'll watch March Madness. I'm not a huge watcher of like regular season college basketball, especially when it's guys who are outside of like the main divisions. So can't like claim to know much about either. I guess the interesting thing, because of something you mentioned as you were sort of going through about like the developmental side of things, and this is maybe where like I can understand how it jars more with some Clippers fans is the ages of these two guys, because like the developmental thing is all well and good. I loved the draft class where the Clippers brought in Keon Johnson and Brandon Boston Jr. And part of the reason I loved it is because those two guys were like electric. You know, Brandon Boston Jr. was someone who'd suffered from, some real off-court issues, and his stock had fallen in the draft, and it felt like the Clippers were almost going for that, that's someone whose stock had fallen, a lot of upside to him. He obviously didn't realize that with the
Yep.
Clippers now, but like he's still in the league, so there clearly is something there with Brandon Boston Jr. Keon Johnson has gone and had like a decent NBA career off the back of his Clippers career. Again, didn't manage to do it with the Clippers, but they were two guys who were genuine, like developmental products, really projects. I guess is the right way to look at it. And it was partly because of their age. I think like Brandon Boston Jr. got drafted when he was like 18. I think Keon Johnson was only
Yeah.
19 or 20. So like the idea of them being developmental was easier to stomach because they were, still in their teenage years, or at least still in the sort of, early years of their college career before they came into the NBA. Now, that obviously depends how ready for the league you are. I would argue that Brandon Boston Jr. wasn't ready for the league and showed that in his minimal minutes with the Clippers. I think he probably needed to go and be on a losing team like the Spurs, to be able to realize that, and be able to get more of those minutes, more of the kind of touches that he wants, more of those reps. Because as you said before, Tyler is here to win, and there's like, we saw it last season. There aren't many garbage time minutes with the Clippers because the Clippers are going to try and compete from minute one to minute 48. So even the guys that the Clippers drafted last season, we didn't get to see too much of because there weren't many garbage time minutes because the Clippers were competing from minute one to minute 48. The issue with guys like Yanic and guys like Kobe is just the age profiles. Like Yanic comes in at 22 years old, Kobe comes in at 23 years old. Kobe Sanders, I should say, I feel like probably need to differentiate that now that we've got two Kobe's on the roster, shouldn't we? Kobe
Yep.
Sanders coming in at 23 years of age. Like it's not a ton of time to develop really. And I know the Clippers have had success with guys like Terrence Mann, who came in after, a full sort of, I think Terrence Mann had graduated college or at least got into his senior year by the time the Clippers picked him up. I'm sure there's somebody else along the way whose name escapes me for now, but who spent the whole time in college and then came to the Clippers and felt more ready for the league because they were just a more mature individual and all those kinds of things. Maybe if we were sat here with Lawrence Frank right now, that would be more of the things he was talking about. People have obviously sort of poked fun and holes in the sort of personality types of these guys. One being a SoCal native, and Yannick being Swiss and being able to speak a couple of languages. But they are like that's obviously a key thing for the Clippers. Is are these guys? What are their personalities like? Are they ready to be in the NBA? Are they ready to adapt to the lifestyle of jumping up from college to the elite level, to making it? Again, I would probably argue, and this is not to like just slander Brandon Boston Jr. in any way, because like I actually really liked Brandon Boston Jr. He's still a player that I am quite high on because I still see that sort of upside in him, and he's still in the
Yep.
the early stage of his career. We've seen NBA stars develop way later in their careers than Brandon Boston Jr. currently is, albeit he's not a member of the Clippers organization anymore. So I'm probably taking less of a sort of keen interest now. But I would argue that like his, mindset and approach to being in the NBA was probably not where you'd want it to be necessarily. And maybe that's why the Clippers are just drafting a little bit more on personality type now, is that idea that, even if you aren't necessarily like a long-term development project because you're going to be, 24 by the time you're over you're going into your sophomore year and things like that, in the NBA, then we want you to be ready-made to be a part of a roster, ready-made to, get on with our stars, ready-made to be, good in practice and help the best players on our team improve in that way by being able to compete in practice every day. So, it's really like in so many ways it's hard to say because it feels like another one of those things where, and I don't like to let the Clippers organization get off easy with any of these kinds of things either. Like, I think if there's fair criticisms to be had of Lawrence Frank in the front office, I will have it, and I'll absolutely have it when it comes to the draft, because I don't think the Clippers have drafted, well in recent years by any stretch of the imagination. But I can kind of understand, like, if they're trying to sell you on the idea that, well, a guy comes in at 23, he's more NBA ready, then I'm prepared to hear that. But I'm probably less prepared to hear the idea of, like, oh, he's 22 and he's a developmental project and he'll learn from Brook Lopez and Ivica Zubac, because at that point I'm just a bit like, yeah, but like, how long is he going to be around? How long is Brook Lopez going to be around? I would argue less than 2 years to potentially even
Yep.
just a year, because second year is not guaranteed. I don't imagine that Zubac gets used in a trade over the next few years. But listen, like, the Clippers are heading towards a summer in 2027 where they're going to have all the cap space. Ivica Zubac's contract is not up in that summer, so maybe they do
Yep.
look to put him in as part of a trade, just to sort of sweeten the deal and build the core of, like, the next era of the Clippers. So.
Mhm.
Um, like, the development thing, I would struggle to be sold on. The personality thing, I can be a little bit more sold on. I'm still like you. Like, then these two guys are not guys I'm particularly high on. I'm prepared to wait and see, and I'm dead excited to watch Summer League and see, how these guys compete, but particularly how, some of the Clippers draft picks from recent seasons compete, because they are still on that sort of, will they, won't they, with the Clippers too. There's a couple of guys in particular. You mentioned Trenton Flowers already, Cam Christie. I'm so excited to see
Yeah.
play and get stuck more into seeing what he's like as an NBA player,
Mhm.
albeit Summer League is sometimes hard to judge it in this scenario. But yeah, the two Clippers draft picks from this summer, I'm not particularly high on. Does that mean I think the Clippers have like a worse chance of doing anything going into this season? Absolutely not. And, we'll come on to talk about one of the free agents pickups, and why I think that helps the Clippers more than really anything the Clippers could have done besides maybe draft Cooper Flag in this draft class.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And it will, like I said, we'll touch on the big free agent signing in a second. But just I think just to close off, I think there's just a lot of fan sentiment about the draft, and I think compared to getting an old big man, they'd rather have like a new someone who's new and young and athletic, and someone who can sort of bring a bit more excitement. Like everyone's seen Brook Lopez, they think he's old. They'd much rather us have like even, and I think this is the same with the free agency um, prospects or other potential signings we could have made. There seems to be a big clamoring for younger players, but I don't really think that fits the Clippers strategy for right now. And yeah, like I think just finishing on that development point, they just won't have ample opportunity over the next 2 years. Maybe in 2 years' time, if all of a sudden, there isn't a lot of free agents, Kawhi leaves, Harden leaves, the Clippers are now maybe more of a mid to sort of in the lottery sort of team, then we might see a lot more out of these guys and they might get the opportunity to develop. I think there have been quite a few teams who've been successful in the draft who've just had those sort of opportunities and on the way. But I will say it's extremely hard to still find these kind of players, even if you do have the opportunity. I mean, just look at teams like Charlotte. They've only just about landed a couple good young players in their team now, but they've been drafting for years and years and years. Even teams like Chicago Bulls, there is a fine art to it, and obviously the Thunder, unfortunately, with our chest of lottery picks, have done extremely well. But is quite rare that you do get like such a successful team at drafting. So yeah, I'm still excited to see what they can bring, and obviously Summer League's only just around the corner, and we'll be sure to circle back to Yanic and Kobe once that starts and see how they've been getting on. But in terms of another big man that the Clippers have signed, it is Brook Lopez, as you have mentioned, 37-year-old, signed a 2-year, $18 million deal, and he'll be backing up Ivica Zubac. I haven't looked at this, but I can't remember the last time Brook Lopez was a backup center. I don't even know if he has for at least for the Bucks. He's been a starter for many, many years, playing heavy minutes. So he's extremely reliable. I think last season he averaged 13 points, 5 rebounds, 1.9 blocks. He's a stretch big. I think he shoots 37% from three. Josh, what was your immediate reaction to Brook Lopez becoming a Clipper?
Um, Excitement within like the adjusted expectations. I was just looking, by the way, and the last time he wasn't a starter was when he was with the Nets. So that was during the 2014-15 season. He was part of 72 games, played in 72 games, but only started 44. Otherwise, he's been a starting center for most of his NBA career, which I think is partly why this is exciting. Like I saw some talk about whether this is the best backup center Ivica Zubac has had. I mean, one of them in Isaiah Hartenstein became a champion this summer, so like I'm never going to
Yep.
necessarily do down Isaiah Hartenstein. I loved it when the Clippers signed DeMarcus Cousins, as much as it was an experiment that didn't necessarily work out. Like it was one that I was like very much on board with because of the the sort of offensive talents of DeMarcus Cousins, especially, albeit they were fading by the time that he came to the Clippers. Um, so Brook Lopez, I would have probably in that top three, I guess, with those other guys, probably just ahead of DeMarcus Cousins in the sense of like, even though Brook is at the age he is now, like there's still so much he can contribute to this Clippers team, and there is so much he can contribute off the bench. And listen, like that might be some adaptation or mean some adaptation has to take place because we've mentioned there he's not necessarily been a bench guy throughout much of his career. He's definitely going to be a bench guy in this scenario. I don't imagine there's going to be many double big lineups with Zoo and Lopez, as much as that is a thing that is creeping into the sort of wider NBA discourse now with the way the Thunder did it this season, of course. I can't see a world in which that works for Ivica Zubac and Brook Lopez, even though Brook is, can stretch the floor out with his three-point shooting. I don't want to see too much of him and Zubac defending the perimeter together. Um, so yeah, like in that sense, I do expect him to be the backup. I expect him to be useful in his minutes. I expect him to be a key veteran in a locker room full of veterans. Obviously, everyone's going to mention the average age of the Clippers now being old in the way it is, but this is where, like I say, it's excitement adjusted to expectations. Is like I sort of think, and it happens throughout sports really, because I definitely see it in football circles where like the best example I can think of is like there was a summer where Liverpool didn't sign any players and West Ham signed like eight players, and someone put out a thing being like, wow, what a summer for West Ham. And it's like, well, no, West Ham needed to make eight transfers because they were not a good team. Liverpool didn't
Yeah.
because they were right up at the top of the Premier League. Like the Clippers are heading towards basically having like no money on their books in 2027 besides maybe Ivica Zubac. So with that in mind, like, is it wise that they go and get tied up to like an expensive young guy now? And like you've seen some of the contracts given out in the past few days. I saw a tweet today, and I wondered if I'd sort of misinterpreted it slightly about the new CBA because it mentioned about like the shrinking of the middle class basically. And I originally thought like, oh, that like if that means middle class in terms of teams, and like I don't think that's the case. I think most teams now believe they can win a championship. Like the middle class is like there's four bad teams or four, convincingly losing and never thought they had a chance of the playoffs teams last season. And even then, I'd argue the Pelicans probably did think they did until they very much didn't. Otherwise, everyone else felt like they had a shot of getting into at least the play in the East and the West. So besides the bottom two in both conferences, everybody else felt like they had a chance of being in the playoffs to some extent. And then there was loads of teams above that felt like they had a chance at a championship because we're in the parity era of the NBA now. So you have to kind of accept everything that comes along with that to an extent. But then I guess the trick around like the shrinking of the middle classes is that it could mean that well, there's just not a lot of guys who sign for lower mid-level exceptions anymore. Most people are getting paid roughly 10 million, or they're on vet minimums. There's not a ton of in between for that now. And that's where like it probably has just become trickier for the Clippers to go and get the kind of value that they've seen like in a player like Chris Dunn, for example, or maybe even if you thought that Derek Jones Jr. was quite good value, it's hard for them to go and get that value now because that would ultimately mean that you're probably having to give 4 years to a guy like, I mean, Luke Cornett, as great a player as he's been for the Boston Celtics in his role. He's just been given a 4-year contract to be a backup center for the San Antonio Spurs. So like you're not going to be able to sell a lot of young guys around the league on the idea that we want you to come to the Clippers, not take up our full mid level tax exception mid level, and then also you won't be able to sign for 4 years because in 2 years we'd like you to probably be off our
Yeah.
books. Like I just don't know how you sell that dream to anybody, and that's where a guy like Brook Lopez means the Clippers get older. Yes, it means the Clippers get the money off their books in 2027 still. For me, it feels like not the perfect signing, I wouldn't say, but an ideal signing for the direction the Clippers are heading in. And that's ultimately where, like, I'm just so prepared to just, like, again, I'll criticize the Clippers when I think they need to be criticized. I'm prepared to watch the Brook Lopez move and how it plays out. And if I think there's room to criticize the Clippers for that, I'll criticize the Clippers for that. Like, I don't necessarily need to do that beforehand because I'd like to see the evidence of that first. Um, but for now, like I think it's a very smart move from the Clippers. I think they've managed to quite heavily underpay on a player who has been a pretty important fixture for the Bucks in the past few years. I mean, Giannis, who
Yeah.
is the greatest Milwaukee Bucks player of all time, is currently lobbying for Brook Lopez to have his jersey retired. So I think that tells you all you need to know about the past few years of Brook Lopez. He's an NBA champion with the Bucks, of course. Um, I'm prepared to just wait and see what it looks like with Brook Lopez. I am excited by the idea of him. I'm still very excited about the Clippers getting to 2027 and having all that cap space and seeing what they can do with that because I referenced before that's where I think guys like Michael Winger and Lawrence Frank can absolutely come into their own. I don't know what you think about the Brook Lopez move, James.
Well, just on that final point, I mean, who's a free agent or who could be a free agent in 27 if he doesn't get traded? I mean, it's Giannis. And, you've just had Brook Lopez on the team for maybe 2 years. Who's the best person to be telling Giannis how amazing Intuit Dome is, how amazing life is in Los Angeles, how well run the franchise is? You know, I'm not saying they brought in Brook Lopez to, try and get a run up at Giannis, but it gives you an opportunity, right? If 2027 is what you're aiming for and he doesn't get traded by then, but obviously, even if you're in trade talks with Giannis, I'm sure he's gonna be able to have next pick over where he goes. He's given Bucks enough. We've seen that with many, many other players. You know, yeah, having him is just going to help with that. But I think that's more of just a side benefit more than anything else. I was shocked with the Brook Lopez signing more so because I thought he was going back to the Bucks. And we have to remember the timeline of this news. We had this before the Bucks waived Dame, which was insane in itself, and then went and grabbed Miles Turner. And I think from what I've been reading, that's been in the works for a little while. So I think either Brook has said, I want another opportunity, which I don't think was pretty widely reported. I think it was I was fully expecting him to go back there.
Yeah.
I would also say that, if they're looking to move off Dame, they also probably wanted to move out Brook so they could bring Miles Turner in, but then also have the flexibility to go and grab all the other guys that you're going to need because you've just lost Dame, right? So I think there was sort of a mutual departing there. Maybe the Clippers hadn't really planned for grabbing Brook. Maybe they were looking at guys like Clint Capella, I think, who was heavily linked. I think if you looked at that big man list start free agency, it was very slim, and I
Yeah.
wasn't particularly fond of many of the names on there. And I think Clint Capella is a great player, and I think he potentially could have been a good fit for the Clippers with James Harden because he played with James Harden before. But I don't think he's really what they needed. And I think Brook Lopez was more. He has a skill set they've needed, and I think he's got the skill set that they've been looking for in the backup center for many seasons. And it's just not often that you have a stretch big like Brook Lopez has become available, or albeit he's at the end, coming to the end of his career as a 37-year-old, he's still extremely productive, and he's been operating as a starter, as you said, for the past 10 seasons. Obviously, he's started to tail off, but I think as he's starting to tail off, that's obviously it's a great opportunity for him to now just like take a step back, become a backup center. And he's going to be mostly playing against the other big men of other teams. I think probably the hardest matchup he's going to have is OKC. I think the Nuggets have got Valanciunas. He's a good player, but most other teams, I think, like I mentioned, the Lakers don't even have a big right now, by the way. So he's gonna love that matchup, playing against nobody, maybe a small ball five, and be able to stretch the floor. I think we're gonna see an increase in production, at least against last year. I had some stats. I think he's still a really, really good rim protector, which is obviously perfect for the Clippers and their sort of defensive lineups that they're going to be able to throw at teams. I think last season his rim defensive field goal percentage was 58.6. Ivica Zubac last year was 54.9. Obviously, he had a great season. The season before that, Brook Lopez defensive field goal percentage at the rim was 55.7. So obviously, he has started to sort of tail off a bit there, and he's allowing more points at the rim. But he was playing like 30 plus minutes per game and played basically the whole season for the Bucks, competing against the likes of Nikola Jokic, etc. So, you know, I can really see him being really effective in short spurts. And I know there were some concerns around taking minutes from Ivica Zubac. I'm not concerned about that,
No.
really. He's going to play when we need him. Maybe in the playoffs, you don't want to take his minutes away, but you just want to make sure he's primed and ready for that. And I think someone raised a good point around him being just like perfect insurance because not that I'm confirming there's a Clippers curse, but obviously there's been a whole lot of random injuries, and I'm touching wood right now that he doesn't get an injury next season. But you wouldn't be mad with Brook Lopez being a starting center should something happen to Ivica Zubac. You would be mad of having Drew Eubanks or Mo Bamba, which would have been the case last year if something had happened to him. He would be looking at small ball fives or Drew Eubanks. So that the team becomes weaker. I think the drop off is less. Obviously, like I said, he's getting older, but I think it's just a perfect backup for him. And like I said, I don't think it's really something the Clippers planned for, but I think it was just a great opportunity that has come up. Brook Lopez was actually, I believe, mentored Zubac when he first went to the Lakers. At least I
Yep.
think I saw some pictures of that. So, I've already got chemistry and he was able to develop him. And now it's, the mentor becomes the mentee in some way. And obviously Yanic is just, like I mentioned at the top of the podcast, he's just going to benefit like massively from having these two amazing players that he can really learn from and develop next to. So I think that's going to be fantastic for him. And yeah, I'm just overall just really, really pleased with it. I know that some people obviously been disappointed with the age, but I think like we've mentioned, the Clippers are operating across this 2-year window, which limits some of the targets that they can go for because they are looking for longer deals. They are looking to secure the futures. There's still a whole load of players in free agency or restricted free agents who've still not been able to sign deals because there's not a whole lot of cap space left out there, and I think we are going to see some players get quite disappointed. So, a lot of these guys have just been going for the most money over the most years that they can get, and I really think that limited the Clippers pulled down to really Clint Capella or nobody else. So yeah, really really happy with it. I think he's going to be a fantastic fit. I don't think the Clippers have had a big this good since Hartenstein. I was a massive Hartenstein fan. I think they've been continuing to chase their tail a bit with the bigs that they've brought in, and as you've mentioned a few names there. I don't think they've had a stretch big this good as a backup for a long time. Even Serge Ibaka, but even then, I don't think he was particularly great. I think he was never particularly great for the Clippers. The Clippers got very lucky with Hartenstein. I don't think they planned for him to be as good as he is. Obviously now NBA champion and I think one of the best role players in the league. So yeah, we'll see. We'll see. But I'm really really excited for Brook to be coming to LA. And apparently he loves Disneyland, so that's even better for him. He's going to have a fantastic time. Any closing thoughts on Brook? And maybe we can touch on James Harden and his extension that was announced recently.
Yeah, no, I think you've covered most of the Brook stuff. I think like I can understand again all the reasons that like and I'm not trying to be like offensive to hear my opinion is that I'm excited about Brook. My opinion is that I'm pretty disappointed in the way the Clippers drafted, but I ultimately don't really care a ton about how the Clippers draft because I don't think it's how the Clippers need to move as good as a team as they are. I think the way the Clippers are looking to move at the moment is that they want to get old and have vets on their team and get all the money off the books in 2027. Brook allows them to have another great vet on their team, allows them to get more money off the books in 2027. I'm dying to see what it is the Clippers look to do in 2027 because unfortunately, James, We did see the other day that our Shea Gilgeous-Alexander dream, which I was bringing to the podcast, as like a little gift for me and you, really, just to see if we could, watch how that developed over a couple of years. Unfortunately, it turns out the winning regular season MVP, Finals MVP, being the scoring champion of the NBA and things like that will probably get you a whole lot of money. So the OKC Thunder have paid Shea Gilgeous-Alexander that money. He will no longer be a free agent in 2027. Farewell, my sweet prince. I don't want Giannis Antetokounmpo. Let me just put that out there right now. I'd rather we went for someone younger who we could build the franchise around for a few years than a like
Yeah.
32 and a half year old Giannis. I think he'll be by that point.
Yeah.
But I'm prepared to see what the Clippers do with that. It feels like that's the direction of travel. I don't think the Clippers are making any secrets about that. It's pretty well signposted. You've seen, the current contract scenario, the cap table with the Clippers and when people's contracts expire. So yeah, expecting good things out of Brook Lopez this season. Hopefully, lots more from the Clippers in the coming years when we finally get to see why the Clippers are so old right now and why they're getting so much money off their books ready for 2027.
Yeah, no, I feel the exact same way, but I think I'd be shocked if he hadn't signed a new contract. Obviously, talking about SGA, just won their first championship, and they've still got a very young team. It could very much be a dynasty. He's obviously going to want to stick around for that. I didn't think they had a chance. I don't think either of us really thought they had a chance. I think we always thought it was a pipe dream, him sort of returning to LA. Who knows in the sort of long distance future? But there are a few other names on that list that obviously would be really, really interesting to see if they're in a position by then to be a free agent. But yeah, let's see. Let's see. One player who won't be a free agent and has returned to the Clippers is James Harden, who declined his 36.3 million player option, but re-signed for 2 years, 81.5 million with a partially guaranteed player option in 2026-27, which I think is really interesting because I've seen mixed reporting around the Clippers maybe even eyeing up any opportunities that come up in 2026. I've had a look at that class, but I don't think there's a whole lot of guys there. I think it's potentially better than this year, but I'd be surprised if they do sort of pivot from this team. I can definitely see Harden and Kawhi staying together for the next 2 years, but that remains to be seen. At least gives them the opportunity should something happen. If they do want to make any sort of trades, it's a far easier contract to trade, etc. So yeah, and of course, I think it's just key that they keep him together. And I think if you're keeping Kawhi, you've got to keep Harden. It goes both ways. If you're looking to still compete over the next 2 years, keeping him around is really important. The Clippers still owe the Sixers a whole lot of draft capital, but I think they owe them a couple of picks over the next 3 seasons to like 2030. So sort of going to have to absorb that cost if you want to keep him around for that. But I think separately from any of the sort of more like operational sides of the NBA, he was fantastic last season and was one of the reasons they got the fifth seed and were able to get into the playoffs and into the first round and help the Clippers overachieve. He really ran that team. He ran it really incredibly well whilst Kawhi was away, and sort of coming back from injury and was able to hold things down. 22.8 points, 8.7 assists, 1.5 steals. He was an All NBA third team. Still just fantastic at 36 years old. The playoff performances and the criticisms with them over the seasons, those are still there. He didn't have a great game seven, but then I don't think many of the Clippers did. I think they really just sort of ran out of steam in that series. But I thought in the other games he was fantastic. So yeah, I'm really, really pleased that he's back. Any thoughts on James Harden returning, Josh?
Um, yeah, like again, just a move that I feel like is geared towards the Clippers getting off their money in 2027. I understand all the concerns about James Harden. Like I feel like he is a playoff dropper. I don't think the game seven was the only game where he dropped his level for the Clippers in this playoff series. Um, I think was it game one maybe that he didn't have such a great game in. There
Yeah.
was one game where we sort of expected the Clippers to be able to land a punch. I think it probably was
Mhm.
game one because the Clippers were quite close to winning that game, weren't they? And then ended up winning game two instead, to sort of split that away leg of the series. So um, like it's a tricky one. Like I am into the idea of the Clippers going and getting somebody who is a playoff riser rather than a playoff dropper. Again, like that couldn't be a young player. And then at that point, I'm asking the question of who that is if it's not James Harden. James Harden raises the regular season floor. I think you can find a way. Where particularly if you're just going to imagine that Kawhi Leonard misses some time, as much as I'd like to imagine there's a world where Kawhi Leonard doesn't miss any time, let's just say that there's a pattern of a lifetime that's going on here, and Kawhi misses some time this season. James is there to raise the regular season floor. It's again like coming back to the Brook Lopez thing. What I think Brook Lopez will do, he'll raise the regular season floor. He'll make things easier for Ivica Zubac in that sense, so that Ivica Zubac doesn't go into the playoffs as tired as I think he was in the playoffs last season. Um, the trouble I think is, and this is where like the backup point guard is going to be crucial, really. And I know we'll come on to talk a little bit more about that and who we maybe think it will be. It's really crucial because like to help James raise the playoff ceiling, I guess, you need to find somebody else to help the Clippers raise the regular season floor. Like, I don't think that can fall to James Harden and then him be expected to be someone who raises the playoff ceiling as well. Like, I think he is at his nature a bit of a playoff dropper. I've seen him have good playoff games for Houston, for Brooklyn, for the Clippers, of course. But I think like the pattern is that he's not always going to have good playoff games in the way that like a Kawhi Leonard, albeit didn't have a great game seven, but you can pretty much trust that Kawhi Leonard is going to give you, everything night after night in the playoffs. And obviously a couple like the other big stars in the NBA right now will do the same. James is not up there with those guys. He's a rung below those guys. For me, he's a rung below Kawhi Leonard, even although he made, an all NBA team this season. I think that was the reward for just how good he was during the regular season, really, and not necessarily a reward for like anything that people were expecting him to do in the playoffs necessarily. It's a regular season award. So like I'm pleased that he's been rewarded by the Clippers for what he did in the last regular season. Again, like I don't want to sound like I'm just like boring on with this, but it helps the Clippers towards that ultimate aim of having no money on the books by 2027. It's a reward for James because he takes a little bit of a pay rise. It allowed the Clippers to keep that financial flexibility. So I think it just kind of suits all parties. And if the Clippers can find somebody who can make things easier on James in the regular season this season, then who knows? Like, I don't want to try and do like the copium thing, and like there's that meme which I feel like only ever goes around about James Harden. Like, it didn't work for anybody else, but maybe it could work for us. Like, I
Yeah.
don't want to get dragged into that because I feel like I've done that like a million times with not only James but the Clippers in general. I will imagine again that the Clippers will make the playoffs this season because they'll be great in the regular season. I imagine that James Harden will drop stinkers in the playoffs next season, not necessarily in every game the Clippers play in the playoffs, however many that is. I expect that it will be some stinkers. So let's just go and find a guy who eases the burden so that if we do get to that point again, I don't have to necessarily sit here and be like, well, James played really well in the regular season. Like, make me slander James Harden on this podcast next year, please, Los Angeles.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head with James. He's a floor raiser. I think if you look at the alternatives, if they weren't going to bring him back, it's not looking great. It was going to get worse. And I think if you don't look him back, you may as well get ahead of 2027 now and just blow everything up and start trying to develop some guys. But even then, the next few picks is obviously with other teams, so it's not an option for the Clippers. The Clippers have to stay competitive, and James Harden helps them do that. I think it's as simple as that, and we'll just have to wait and see if he's able to deliver, or if he's again, like you mentioned, going to be someone who's a playoff dropper. No, he's still got great desire to win a championship, and I think that's what I appreciate about him the most. He doesn't ever strike me as someone who doesn't care, um, and I think that would be the major issue for me with James. he's someone who's, I think, thrived in this Clippers team and this creating a culture. And I think everyone who's playing with him is sort of raving about him. Obviously, he features Zubac the most. I think it's not a surprise or a coincidence that he's had his best season with a full season with James Harden, because I think he's sort of raised his floor and ceiling really, and I think he's sort of leveled up his game, and he's going to go down as one of the NBA greats. Just keeping him alongside Kawhi and his obviously availability will just help the Clippers out. And I think it was very important for them just to run it back. We took Denver to Game 7, who took OKC to Game 7. Like we are, if if we keep the group together, obviously there are Denver have got better, etc. We're going to be in the conversation. We're going to continue to be in the conversation. I think that's enough. There's not really any other moves. We're sort of out of moves in this era, and like I said, it's that 2 year window to 2027 where we can reset and go in a different direction. So just the keeping it going, the continuity has, I think, been really important. A few other moves that I wanted to touch on just quickly, and this doesn't really have to be a major talking point because I don't think Drew Eubanks did a whole lot for the Clippers during his really short stint with the team, but it was someone that the Clippers have waived in the week. And his 4.8 million non-guaranteed contract is now away from the Clippers. I don't know exactly what that means for their cap, but I know it brings them, I think, around like 10 million under the cap holds. So yeah, I don't think that means they can just go and grab like one 10 million player. I think that would be potentially like two. Now they've got like two different roster spots. I can definitely just see them picking up one guy and then going into season with one open roster spot, because as we know, the Clippers have always been like a buyout team. And I think there's maybe an even interesting name we can speak about in terms of, obviously we've mentioned it in the podcast, Dame Lillard obviously becoming available. We've obviously not heard about who this next player is going to be. There's been a lot of talk about Chris Paul returning to LA. However, I wonder if Dame becoming available and obviously the Clippers still having some room in that MLE is making them think about it. But yeah, remains to be seen. What do you think the Clippers do next? Because they do have this money. They are looking for a backup point guard. Do you think it's Chris Paul? Are there any other names that you think might make sense for the Clippers? We may even hear about it any second now. We're still obviously the news as of recording on the 2nd July, 9 p.m. There's nothing that's come through about this. So yeah, what do you think the Clippers do next, Josh?
Yeah, I feel like I mentioned this in the Clippers UK group chat now, but I feel like the impending Chris Paul. I mean, it seems to have like got further away, to be honest, judging by what like key NBA media voices are saying. I think it was Ramona Shelburne who's come out and said like the Suns is the most likely spot for Chris Paul. So it maybe doesn't seem like we're going to get that reunion there, but like it almost feels like Jaws music for like what's going to come of like the Clippers backup point guard position. I don't think Damian Lillard makes any sense, to be honest. I think like you probably see with Dame that unless somebody is prepared to take an expensive flyer on the idea that like he just doesn't play again this season, then like maybe he ends up somewhere. I would probably imagine that Dame just spends a year being a free agent, rehabbing off his own accord, unless there's a team who are prepared to like bring him into rehab, and then maybe he signs with that team next summer or something. If that's the thing that's like even allowed to happen, I presume it would be, because I don't see how that can like be any sort of contractual issue. Um, I don't see how the Clippers or why the Clippers should want to do that, because, like as I say, like you want to be sat here in a year's time being like we gave James Harden and Kawhi Leonard everything we could within that sort of financial flexibility thing. Still, if you sign Damian Lillard for what I imagine will probably be like money the Clippers don't have anyway, because I imagine if even if you're Damian Lillard and even if you've got the guaranteed money of the wave and stretch from Milwaukee. Like you're still going to want paying a fair bit of money. Like if there's like a 1+1, and there's like a guarantee of some money down the line, then I don't see why the Clippers or Dame really go for that. So yeah, I can't see any moves in that direction. Chris Paul was the one that kind of made sense to me, just because like he's 40 now, or into his 40s now. I don't imagine he's got more than 2 years of his NBA career left. He would get to come back home, be close to his family in California and things like that. So like in loads of ways, I thought that made a ton of sense. I just wonder whether Chris Paul feels a bit like there's maybe still some sort of like bad blood or something within the Clippers franchise, which may be why he has the Phoenix Suns out ahead of us. Like that remains to be seen. Obviously just NBA insider talk at the moment. I believe in what Ramona Shelburne says because she's a pretty good NBA journalist, but we'll wait and see on that Chris Paul thing, like whether LA can put up an offer at all or whether they can put up one that attracts Chris Paul. If it's not Chris Paul, I'll be really interested to see who it is because again, it to me, like I want it to be someone who is a regular season floor raiser, someone who can take the keys when James Harden isn't around or like shouldn't be around, where we should be able to rest James Harden a little bit more this season with the idea that he's got more run time and more legs under him in the playoffs, at least ramp him up towards the playoffs. So someone who can play more in the earlier stage of the season. Um, I think you saw last season that like maybe Norm can do that if Kawhi is also around. I was worried in the way Norm's season ended, and particularly how he played in the playoffs. To be honest, I thought he wasn't great really, but that's not to say that like I'll write off Norm to any extent. He's obviously the contract that people feel like is probably the most enticing for a trade at the moment. So whether he will still be around to be a key ball handler for the Clippers going into the season remains to be seen. Chris Dunn, I don't think was particularly strong on the ball handling duties from what we saw of him last season. So strong on the defensive end, obviously. So like not a bad option as a backup guard at least. Um, just not someone who I expect to be that sort of direct ball handling replacement for James Harden when you go into the bench. So
Mhm.
yeah, Chris Paul is probably still my just about ideal candidate. Again, framed within the idea of financial flexibility and things like that. If there's someone else who could just come out the woodwork, there may even be more like guys who get waived because we weren't expecting Dame to get waived, were we? And ultimately he did. So maybe there'll be someone else who gets waived, and the Clippers can sort of be opportunistic and pick up on a little surprise there. But besides that, again, like it's just a pretty weak free agency class. There's not a great deal that appeals to me within it really, especially when it comes to the backup point guard situation. So I'll wait and see and wait and hope that I am excited by whatever it is that the Clippers choose to do next.
Yeah, I think for me it's Chris Paul, Damian Lillard at a very, very, very long shot. Otherwise, I think it gets real complicated with who else the Clippers can bring in. I think, like you mentioned, it's quite a small free agency class in terms of guys that can really come in and be effective. I think there were some players that the Clippers could have looked at. Like I've been very interested in the Clippers picking up Colin Sexton, and that's been a player that I think there's been some interest in going back a few seasons, even before he even got to Utah. However, contract that I think obviously he would have wanted, and we spoke about this already, but we are looking at those short-term deals, and I'm a fan of Colin Sexton, but I think he's maybe a bit too similar to Norman Powell. Like he's not really the typical ball handling point guard. Like he's more of like a scorer, and I think that can get quite complicated. So for me, Chris Paul is like the best fit. He's also been like Brook Lopez. He's old, but super available. He played, I think, every game for the Spurs last season. But whether it's bad blood with the Clippers, which I've never really thought. I thought that more of Blake Griffin than Chris Paul. I'm not sure if I read anything, and maybe you can correct me on this, but I don't know if there was anything with how things ended with Chris Paul and James. But again, I'm not particularly sure on that either. So yeah, I'm not sure. I think that the reporting I've seen is that he's leaning to the Suns as well, and I think I've seen that post today. Um, I have also seen that I think it was Tyus Jones, if he didn't go back to the Suns, that they were then, they're going to need some guards, and I think, potentially even a big factor in it is the kind of minutes he's going to get. Can he be a starter with the Suns? I know they've got they've obviously just got Jalen Green, they've got Devin Booker, but I think Chris Paul could be a good fit next to either of those two as like the primary ball handler. So maybe they can promise him starting minutes, which would be favourable to him as he played a lot of minutes with the Spurs. So yeah, for me, there's not a whole lot out there. We obviously have had Ben Simmons, but from what I've seen, he's looking for more than the minimum,
Yeah.
which to me, I didn't see enough from Ben to warrant paying more than the minimum. I think he's got to prove that he can be healthy and can perform consistency. There were flashes that I really loved from Ben in terms of being like a two-way guard. His passing, obviously, ability to play the five. I think it's actually that ability to play the five. And now that we've got three bigs, that might mean that we won't go for him. I think he played maybe more minutes of the five than maybe the point guard position. So yeah, I'm still scratching my head with what the Clippers are going to do with these roster spots. I could definitely see them taking one to the season, but taking two, I'm not sure. Maybe they're going to eye up a wing player or a power forward. I don't think we've touched on Amir Coffey. The reporting I've seen is that he could be on the way out, that he may get better deals elsewhere. And that's again because the Clippers are not looking to overpay on some of the role players. They've been very cautious around who they give some of these deals out to, which is what we've seen already from obviously Brook Lopez, but also guys like Nico Batum, who was also re-signed, which obviously we haven't. I don't think we've touched on as well, and I don't want to forget about Nico. Obviously, that's a great player to bring back, but yeah, I think we could be waiting a little bit to hear about this final move. Obviously, there's still some guys like Kobe Brown. Maybe they think that he can take a step up, and maybe they want to keep another spot open for summer league and see. I don't even know if Kobe will play in summer league, but should he play if they want to give a contract to him? But yeah, let's see on that. Any closing thoughts, Josh, at all? Like anything else you wanted to cover on our episode today?
I was just having a look through the guys who are like in free agency at the moment. So
Mm,
Malcolm Brogdon's in there. Could be of
yeah.
interest. He's been a guy who's previously been linked with the Clippers. If we want to go back to some former Flames, talking about Chris Paul, Russell Westbrook is on the board there.
Mm,
If we want to wind it all the way back, yeah, there's some names. There's not a ton that sort of like leaps out as you say. Maybe Cameron Payne is like one who the Clippers might have a little look at. It doesn't feel very ball handling again to me. It feels a little bit more like an off-ball offensive guy, Cameron Payne. Kyle Lowry's on there, but I think his best years are more than far behind him, and I don't think I
mm,
enjoy the idea of Kyle Lowry in a Clippers uniform, to be honest. So, wait and see what the Clippers will do with that. I do want to touch on Nico Batum just briefly because, yeah, he probably deserves to be more, as you say, than just like a sort of footnote in this podcast because, like, just brilliant again for the Clippers last season. A guy who manages to find a way to expand his own role through like his sheer, I guess, just ability to step up in the moments that he's needed. Like he was probably the Clippers' third best player in the playoffs this season. I feel like that's not an unfair thing to say. I think he was better than James throughout 7 games. He was behind Kawhi and Zoo throughout that 7 games, but probably ahead of anybody else. So um, Nico like absolutely deserves to finish his career in LA. I'm pleased that he does. I'm pleased that he's made this feel like home. His wife clearly loves it here as well, Lily. She seems to constantly be interacting with Clippers fans on Twitter and like loves the idea of LA and stuff. So yeah, pleased that he's going to get to see it out at his home in inverted commas. Um,
yep.
he feels like home to us as much as we do to him. Like you know, all for the Batum Battalion and the Wall, getting to celebrate Nico Batum for whether it's just the 1 year because second year is not guaranteed, or whether it is both years of his contract. I kind of hope it'll be both because again, like even given his twilight years, like he's still been able to contribute so much to the Clippers. So excited to see another season of Nico Batum. Excited to see what the Clippers do next in free agency. Um, yeah, probably that's I guess that's it until we do the next one, which I guess will be after Summer League now. So maybe we'll have some. Well, hopefully
Yeah.
we'll know who the last person we sign in free agency is by then, and hopefully they don't wait till after Summer League to confirm that. But maybe we'll have some more answers from Summer League about maybe it's a guy like Kobe Brown, maybe it's Cam Christie, maybe there's someone there who just pops up and surprises us. Who knows? Who knows, James?
Yeah, no, we'll see. We'll definitely obviously come back and talk summer league. Obviously very interested in who this last position is going to go to, and we're sure to catch up again. Hoping it won't be as long as obviously the previous episode, which is we obviously recorded before we went out to the Denver Nuggets. We'll definitely be talking a lot of Clippers over the off season and then moving into October when the Clippers obviously going to kick off their second season in Intuit Dome. But yeah, happy to call it there. Unless obviously Shams comes in with some last minute clutch
I've been
news that
like
they're going to
looking
be
at it the
picking up
whole
someone.
time just in case.
Yeah, just in case there's nothing. I'm going to give him one more second. No, there's nothing. We're going to call it there. Appreciate obviously everyone for listening, watching. Please continue to follow the pod, put the notifications on, and wherever you get your podcasts. I'm obviously James Warner. As always, you can find us and our content over at Clippers UK. Josh, remind the people where they can come and check out your work.
Yeah, J Sexton 24 across all the socials. A lot more basketball content to come from me, and well, me and James in particular as well. This episode's been in partnership with Sports Social. We should have probably dropped that at the start, but I don't think they'll mind at this point. We've recently signed up to a little partnership with them, so appreciate their
Yeah.
faith in us. So as you say, James, hopefully some more regular episodes to come from us, particularly going into the new season, and hopefully plenty to be excited about in terms of our own personal futures, but also what that pertains to with the Clippers too. So good to have you on again, mate. Good to speak to you.
Yeah, you too, Josh. Really appreciate it. That's all for this episode. Until next time, go Clips go.